Hi everyone and welcome to your daily horoscope and tarot reading. Today we have a very powerful and intense sky, but perhaps the best word to use here is tense because the sky is filled with squares, conversations of maximum tension, and these can be quite frustrating, quite stressful, quite oppressing energies because most of the squares have much to do with Mercury and with the Sun and Uranus in the sign of Taurus. And Taurus is our value system, it is our self worth, it is our personal acquisitions. So everything today is about money, is about value, is about our material situation, which is as it is in the present moment, but because that very powerful Saturn in the sign of Aquarius, and Aquarius has much to do with the future and future plans, is squaring Mercury in Taurus. So, this is the energy of concern, this is the energy of worry, but it isn't that emotional type of worry where your feelings just go haywire, but it's rather ration, it's rather intellect, it is actual foresight, as in it is perfectly logical and rational. So this is where your worries are quite realistic and they have to do with like physical reality, they have to do with real life. So an emotional charge, may it be optimistic or pessimistic, doesn't really do much. It doesn't really solve the problem. It doesn't really help that much. And Saturn in the sign of Aquarius has much to do with our present moment limitations, the social distancing, the closing of borders, the closing of certain regions. It is restricting our travel, it is restricting our material transactions, so to speak. So, this is an energy where our worries and our concerns are actually quite realistic, but at the same time, Mercury is extremely close to Uranus, its higher octave, and of course, both of them are very, very close to the Sun, the main luminary, so this energy isn't all that bad. Yes, the square with Saturn is a powerful wake up call. It grounds us in reality, it shows us what our true options are, but at the same time, there's that element of surprise thanks to Uranus because we cannot know what the future brings because the future in the present moment is uncertain, is absolutely uncertain. So that means that there's a very big chance for solutions, for unexpected resolutions enter our lives. This is where the future can be chaotic, but chaos can be both good and bad. It can go either way. So maybe that Uranus is actually our present moment optimism, because if there's nothing else we can rely on, well then maybe we can trust hazard, maybe we can trust, the uncertainty of the future, because it can go either way. It doesn't necessarily have to be bad news as long as we embody the energy of Uranus, as in, we have to be ready to leave our comfort zones if the situation requires us to do this. Now, this energy is what it is today, but tomorrow Mercury is going to be meeting Uranus in the sky in a very tight conjunction, and that is going to be a very powerful problem solving energy because, yes, we have that square with Saturn, but Uranus is the dominant planet and it has much to do with the future. It has much to do with innovation, with ideas, with coming up with the most ingenious solutions. So when it meets Mercury, its lower octave, it can represent brainstorming, a powerful epiphany. It doesn't have to be something totally internal. It can also manifest as communication, as advice, as like public news, as communication from authorities, the governments, local council, etc. It can represent like either solutions that we come up with ourselves, future plans, maybe planning a future project, planning ahead, working with what you've got, not relying as much as how things used to work until this present moment. But at the same time, all of this can come from an external source, maybe someone else's idea, maybe the help, support, or offer of help from the local community, the local council, local people, your, circle of friends, maybe, because Aquarius has much to do with your friends and people who you associate yourself with. It can play out in very different ways, but it offers solution, and regardless of how stressful, of how worrying and concerning the power of the square is, it is still motivation. It is still ultimately like a celestial push from the back to enter, to step into our futures. This is where we have no choice really but to embody that revolutionary energies of Uranus. It is where we have to work with what we got, and if what we have got is chaotic, it is uncertain, it may be if it is just a random idea, even if it's just something that we are coming up with more out of desperation than anything else, well, it doesn't really matter because all of that can represent a very powerful solution. And later on in this week, as Mercury gets closer and closer to the Sun and also going to dance in a tight conjunction with Uranus, now that can be the most pleasant type of surprise because Mercury is the mind and communication, while Uranus is the higher octave of this. It represents our highest level, highest frequency thought. It represents the unlimited genius of our minds. So something definitely good is going to enter our sphere of awareness. May it have to do with something internal, like our sense of self-worth, where we just come up with something more psychological than anything else, or may it represent any kind of twist or unexpected manifestation of fate where solutions or ideas or plans just come to us in the most unexpected ways. But even though the sky is so very tense in the present moment, all of this is going to change. We might be getting the most positive expression of this energy later on, maybe next week, towards the end of next week, and after Mercury advances into the last decan of Taurus, where it can form a trine with Pluto and Jupiter. And since Pluto is retrograde, this is really, really good news because it represents our own personal power, our own inner self empowerment, which can act like a very powerful magnet, attracting solutions, attracting even fated events meant to help us, meant to just get us out of the turmoil and the problems in the most miraculous of ways. Because let's not forget that Jupiter is not only inner truth, it is not only optimism, faith, and hope, but it's also the planet of good fortune. So maybe a powerful manifestation can trigger in our lives one way or another. But of course, we also have that trine with Pluto, so that's also going to be a very powerful energy because not only Mercury is gonna be trine, but also the Sun, which means that whatever losses we might have suffered are actually towards our highest good, just that maybe we are not aware of this 100% in the present moment or when it happens, but this is a really karmic power, this is a karmic energy, and it's a trine, so it's a blessing, which means that whatever happens, it doesn't matter how it seems in the present moment or when it happens, because losses are definitely events which feel rather negative, which distress us, but the main karmic force tells us and reflects to us that this is in our highest good. So if you have to surrender something, if you have to abandon something, if you have to give it up, well, that is going to serve your highest good because it is giving you back your freedom. And very, very many times, the blessing of Jupiter is nothing more than freedom, than being able to make a totally new plan, being able to revolutionize your whole value systems after those losses or terminations, endings took place in your life. But of course, Pluto is also the planet of money. If we look at money as our personal power, what we can achieve with money, So for some people, it's gonna represent a big gain. But either way, however this energy is going to manifest in your life, and I repeat, it's not gonna be right now, it's gonna be next week and after next week. It is gonna be a powerful blessing, and it is going to be a major key to your future. Especially that by then the North Node is going to be in the sign of Gemini, which also represents mobility. It represents energies, regardless if it's karmic or physical or just intellectual. They're going to be that much quicker, that much more efficient, that much more practical. So, this is a really good complementary energy. Now, if we look at the big picture, what's going on in the world, well, this definitely spells economic crisis. This definitely represents the collapse of the old system, at least from the perspective of values and what we hold as valuable, but what we hold as worth. It doesn't just mean like personal possessions, objects, or the money that we have, but it can also represent our own value as professionals, the value of certain kind of professional categories, the value and worth of a type of job or service, etc. And perhaps this part is even more significant because all of a sudden it restructures society. Because if, for example, the very famous designers who made a lot of money even from selling one single item, or the big artists who, for example, that banana with the duct tape, which was sold for like, if I'm not mistaken, for like 200,000 euros or or even more. I'm not perfectly sure. Now that is, if that changes overnight, if that changes suddenly, if people will no longer accept to invest money into something so ephemeral and symbolic, because they know they're gonna be in big trouble in the very close future. Because basically that's what Saturn in Aquarius tells us. It is not a revolutionary energy, but is still providing us foresight, because Saturn is the kind of earthly wisdom, isn't it? It is the big teacher. It requires us to use our life experience and knowledge. So Saturn in Aquarius definitely tells us, well then be careful, because hard times are coming, uncertain times are coming. So this changes value systems and what we hold as valuable from every single perspective. So not just items and money and like banking, personal finances, but also what we are inclined to sacrifice for and what is definitely no longer an option in the present moment. And yes, this is definitely going to affect professional categories. So some people who were doing really well just 2 months ago are now gonna face the truth, well, that their money making skills, so to speak, are a thing of the past, because they have to reinvent themselves and reinvent what they do. Maybe change the prices, maybe change their own value systems. So if this is the big picture, then we can already see what this Uranus is gonna be doing the next 6 years of our lives. And it's gonna influence us personally, but also collectively. So this is just a big work in progress. Even if we're really stressed out, really worried about that square between Mercury and Saturn, and the Sun and Saturn, and Uranus and Saturn, we should think about the fact that this is only one moment in time. The big thing is gonna be taking place over the next 6 years of our lives. So this is just one of the pivotal moments, so to speak, which is not that significant yet. So we shouldn't allow the stress and worry and overthinking to get the better of us, because there's so much more to come. And chances are our personal situations, regardless of how we decide right now, are still gonna change. So let's use this wisdom of being patient and just working with what we have in the present moment. Of course, there's that square between Neptune and Venus, and that is also a very rather negative influence, so to speak, because it confuses us emotionally, we're not sure anymore what we love, who we can trust, who we cannot trust. And from a global perspective, especially around that full moon in Scorpio, this is going to be the energy of deception, maybe fraud on the internet, like fraud and fraudulent activities, dishonesty, tricks on the in the cyberspace, social media. Where this isn't just like a mediatic battle where information, contradicting information and news and all that, statistics maybe battle each other for authenticity, but this is also where some people are gonna be empowered by the Pluto retrograde to con people, to deceive people, to profit off this crisis. So we should really be careful what transactions and purchases we make online and who we trust in this period, because this is when that square between Venus and Neptune can also represent like proper deception and not just a romantic vibe where we deceive ourselves emotionally, which, yes, it can be just as devastating for some people, but that is not a big physical danger, that is not imminent danger of losing out. But if we are victims of like deception and fraud and con, well, then that is a rather significant loss or a significant negative event in our lives. So we should be really, really careful and not allow the wishy-washy emotional wishy-washy vibes of Venus and Neptune square to get the better of us. Yes, as in our dreams and fantasies, we are a little bit more emotional than usual. Those who are single are definitely gonna be dreaming of the love of their lives in this present moment. But we shouldn't allow this surreal Neptunian vibes to get the better of us. We still have to be patient, we still have to be diligent and aware of what's ever going on in our lives. But as I said, this isn't all that bad news, even though this week is very tense, it is very stressful and frustrating. This is just a temporary energy and it's definitely gonna get better starting from next week and afterwards. Yes, the retrogrades are also going to start, but it is the natural cycle, so to speak. So it is a necessary evil, if that makes sense. So we shouldn't be really frightened of the big outer planet retrograde seasons, because they are part of the picture. They are a necessary energy to complete everything that was left behind from the recent past, but at the same time, they are extremely important for us to embody internally their symbolism and make order inside ourselves. So even though the retrograde season is starting imminently, it's not gonna be as bad as we think it's gonna be, because we need that energy. We need that moment of respite from a karmic perspective. And at the same time, it is a perfect opportunity for us to process absolutely everything that went through since the beginning of the year and even going back further. And this is the moment when all of us are gonna have to, contemplate, are gonna have to go deep within and search for the meaning of what this a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which took place on the 12th of January, means for us personally, and how it changed our lives already in a very significant way. Now let's get to the tarot reading, which unfortunately is not that much different than the astrology part. But this is the way tarot works, so it's synchronicity. If this is what the sky reflects, this is what the main energies are, the cards, the tarot is gonna reflect this, maybe from a different perspective, but the main message is gonna be the same, and that's why it's opened by the Princess of Coins. And this means that most of us are focused on a new beginning, to create a new beginning in our lives materially. Now, may this have much to do with work, with career, with profession, or simply finding a source of income, or simply sorting out of our financial situation. For example, like being able to pay off all our debts if we have any in our lives. But this is where our focus is placed in the present moment, just that this card is followed by the Emperor. Now the Emperor is a dual symbol for this reading because on one hand it represents your own personal power, that you're the boss of your own life, but at the same time it also represents that on one hand all of our financial situations for the future, and especially that new beginning which we like to experience, depends very much on the big bosses in our lives, which is centralized power. So it's not just that what we decide, it's not just what we plan to do, it's also what is possible and what is allowed. The Emperor also represents that most of us have absolutely the right attitude, the most ideal attitude, meaning that we do not rush, meaning that we embody our most patient, our most resourceful selves, as in we are a really, really good manager who manages resources, who manages the financial situation. And this means that sometimes we have to make sacrifices. Many times, what we desire, we cannot give to ourselves because we have to think about the future and we have to think of what collective reality in this present moment permits us to have and what we have to give up on. So we are coping really, really well, and many people, they're coping so much better than they would have thought, that they expected. But still, there's that Five of Coins reversed, which in upright position is definitely the card of poverty, material crisis, sickness, illness, as in physical, material turmoil, regardless of how it manifests in our lives. But fortunately, it is reversed, so it's just a fear. It is just a potential manifestation of fate. So this is a big dominant factor in the present moment in our lives, because the Five of Coins reversed itself, it can also represent poverty, but from a spiritual and psychological perspective. For example, we're so worried about what we're gonna do in the very close future that we're just disconnected from spirituality, from our souls, from our higher selves, and this create a feeling, a sensation of, hopelessness, where we're just sinking deep into an ocean of abyss and not being able to see the light at the end of the tunnel anymore. But because it has absolutely nothing to do with us, because we are good managers, as I said earlier, it has to do with physical reality. So basically, this combination of cards means that we have to somehow, each and every one of us, their own unique and individual way, navigate through this global crisis, because this is, from a karmic perspective, very similar when, humanity had its wars, had its big famines, had its big different kind of crises. So yes, the configuration is a bit different, but the feeling, the necessity to survive, the necessity to make certain sacrifices, the necessity to always 24/7 look at the big picture and never the small details, is stressful. It is taking away our spiritual power. But for some people, this is where our diligence and this is where our wisdom can come into play, because we can also perceive this as we sacrificing a part of our spiritual powers through meditating and through holding our frequencies and not allowing our survival mentalities and instincts to turn us into animals, for example. We are not allowing the inner animal who just wishes to survive through any means necessary to rule over our lives. This is where we can preserve our dignity, our equity, our authentic sense of self-worth, where even this crisis is not enough to turn us into something which we do not accept, which we do not like. And this act of personal rebellion against the karmic forces, maybe against external reality, is making sure that we are gonna be the emperors, we are gonna be the kings of our own destinies and fates, where our survival is guided and, so to speak, guaranteed not by our survival mentality, neither by the dominance of our instincts, but rather this is where our wisdom, our connection we have with our souls, and our highest spiritual and moral principles are our guiding light, and they are the ones, they are the pillars, they are the basis which guarantees our survival. And if we look at the big picture, now if we survive being guided by the highest morality and our faith, our healthy faith, well then after we have survived, after all of this is over, we'll have everything we can possibly dream of to reconstruct our lives and to improve our financial situation, because we are no longer gonna be slaves to our wish to survive, to our physical selves, to the restrictions of matter. Because if we went through the hardest period of our lives with embodying maximum dignity, with embodying honor, with embodying our spirit, well then we are champions and winners of the game of life, so to speak. Because if nothing could deter your dignity, if nothing could force you to crawl and just survive disgracefully, well then that means that from a karmic perspective, you have been a very successful student of what modern mystics call the Earth School, and you have passed a big exam with dignity, with honor, with the highest grades, so to speak. And all of this may mean what it is going to mean for your human self, but for your soul, for your spirit, this is big. This is like winning the jackpot. This is like triumphing against the forces of faith and the karmic forces. This is gonna be your personal triumph over this global crisis, this coronavirus situation. This is gonna be like your personal victory against all of humanity's bad karma, where if you survive with honor and dignity, it is absolutely clear that you have been part, one way or another, to purging out all that collective trauma. So chances are, you shouldn't really be worried in the present moment, no matter how dire your financial situation looks like. Even if for the future it's almost a certainty that you're gonna lose out everything, just trust yourself, just trust your destiny, because something is definitely gonna enter into your life which will keep that 5 of coins reversed. It will never allow it to be upright. It will never allow you to sink into the depths of poverty, of misery, of illness, of whatever dangers await us in the future. Now the reading is closed by the Wheel of Fortune reversed and the Death card, and this can symbolize two different things. Now on one hand, it definitely tells us the story that we haven't seen anything yet, that whatever we experienced until this present moment wasn't the highlight of the crisis. The worst is still to come, but that worst isn't gonna be the worst for us personally. It's just gonna be the worst for everyone else who is still trapped in the old value system. As soon as you rebelled against it, and for some people it didn't take the coronavirus crisis to rebel. Some people have actually stepped out of their comfort zones and risked everything and lost everything materially in 2019, or even going back further. And those people are definitely gonna be blessed, because they are gonna realize that they have been so very guided to give up on everything, because everything would have led to this present moment anyway, and it just left them time to process and accept the losses, having to give up this and that, releasing material attachments. So those people who have suffered great material losses before this present moment are like blessed, and no one can deny the blessings. No one can deny the divine intervention, the divine intelligence acting in their lives, because if those losses were like fated events, if those losses were big moments of unbelievable misfortune, so to speak, well, only now can we see that that misfortune was in fact the biggest blessing the universe could have offered you, because in the present moment you're free. In the present moment, you're not bound down by unhealthy detachments, may it be inner ones or outer ones. You are as free as a human being in the present moment could possibly be. And on the other hand, it definitely represents Jupiter and Pluto retrograde, because the death card is Pluto and the Wheel of Fortune is Jupiter, and in reverse position, it definitely represents their retrograde motion, going back and fixing everything that still needs to be fixed to trigger those fated moments, those karmic events which have not been triggered yet, but they are still necessary, they're still so relevant for certain kind of closures. So the combination of these two cards advises us to be patient, because more is about to come. And if you are that kind of person who already done the big inner work to release attachments, well then these retrogrades for you are gonna be the saving grace, while others are gonna be losing, and while others are gonna be so very desperate because they won't have anything in their lives anymore, not internal values and definitely not external values. You're gonna be a person who's gonna gain. You're gonna be a person who's gonna rebuild their lives one way or another, because you're gonna be massively supported by the universe. And even if you have no valid options and choices in your life, well then the universe is gonna offer you something as if by miracle, because guidance works both ways. You were guided at the moment when you lost out, you were guided at the moment when you healed yourself, when you're definitely going to be guided in the very close future. It just makes perfect sense. So you shouldn't have anything to worry about, because this time the universe has your back for real. And if your life until this present moment isn't a very good example of this, well then I don't know what is. Well, thank you so much for listening, and thank you for everyone's support and kind comments. They really mean so much to me. I hope you enjoyed this reading as well, and wish everyone a blessed and safe day. Bye for now.